The New England Patriots and Pittsburgh Steelers will both be playing backup quarterbacks on Thursday Night Football. Do both teams need a new quarterback in this year's draft? We're going to talk about that on a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. Let's roll.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. I am one of your hosts, Tyler Rowland, local expert from Locked On Titans, here with my co-host Alex Clancy, local expert for Locked On Cardinals. We got a big episode on a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast, and it is presented by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, for a first deposit match up to $100. Crossover Thursday on the Locked On Podcast Network is presented by Prize Picks. Make sure to go to your favorite team's Crossover Thursday and get some behind enemy lines information. But as for today's show, we got a big Thursday night matchup. I say big, a little tongue in cheek, between the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New England Patriots. Trubisky versus Zappe. Who doesn't want a little piece of that? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about non-quarterback MVP possibilities for this year. And then, of course, the best games of the week. Thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. Make sure you get subscribed. Stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Alex, this game between the Patriots and the Steelers are a team that's fighting here. The Steelers are a playoff team right now. They're the number one wild card team in the AFC somehow, but looks like Kenny Pickett is pretty banged up. Going to see Mitch Trubisky in this game. Do you think the Steelers can remain a playoff team going forward with this injury to Kenny Pickett and just our general skepticism of the Steelers in general?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's more about the health of TJ Watt than the quarterback. Like, if this defense can hold true, which is what they've done all year, it's allowed Kenny Pickett to throw the ball, 20 times a game. This is about Broderick Jones and the defense. Like, what Broderick Jones, a rookie out of Georgia, has done has allowed the running game to be unlocked. And that's the thing that the Steelers need to do in an effort to win. I think it's 6 and 1, half a dozen of the other with Mitchell Trubisky and Kenny Pickett. I think Mitchell Trubisky's gotten a bum rap pretty much for the majority of his career. Being in Chicago was a tough place to play. He was a quadruple doink or whatever away from winning a playoff game a handful of years ago. Kenny Pickett's not good at football. I saw it firsthand last week against the Cardinals before he got hurt. Not good is not fair, but coming off his best performance as a quarterback the week before, putting up a stinker against a defense that's devoid of, top tier NFL talent at home in the morning slate is kind of puzzling. But to answer the question that you're going to pivot to here, I do think, like, at this point, if Pittsburgh misses the playoffs, even if they make the playoffs, it's kind of a Mike Tomlin situation. It's like, is it good enough? Like, do you need a quarterback? Does it matter if you make the playoffs or not? Do you trade up future draft capital just to snag one of these 4 or 5 guys who are going to go probably in the first round? I think you do, and I think the Patriots, it kind of goes without saying as you pivot to the other side.
Well, I think if that's the question, obviously I'm with you. I think the Steelers' defense could still lead them to a playoff appearance. That absolutely could be the case. But I think it's one of those things where even Steelers fans would know, hey, do we have a team that's ready to go win the Super Bowl right now? I don't think anybody believes that the Steelers are a Super Bowl threat, even if they do get into the playoffs. And I think a lot of that is because you don't believe in the quarterback. You don't believe that Kenny Pickett or Mitch Trubisky can elevate to that next level. Now, I think it would be definitely risky for the Steelers to use like a first-round pick or something like that on a quarterback in the offseason, because you're in a position where it's tough when you're a middle team like the Steelers without an elite quarterback. Where do we build around this guy and use all the resources we have to put the best team around him and hope he can just kind of sail the ship to where it needs to go? Or do we kind of get risky and see if we can upgrade that position and use one of our big assets on seeing if we can get an upgrade there? And I think in this year's draft, we look at the top of it, and obviously that'll pivot to the New England situation as we talk about players that are in the top of the draft. But for the Steelers, I think there could be a number of players at quarterback that are available in the range where they could maybe make a move up, or maybe where even they would pick. Jaden Daniels is a guy who could he go top 10? Maybe he's in the teens somewhere. You look at JJ McCarthy, another guy who some people have mocked in the top 10. I think probably realistically could go in the back end of the first round. Do the Steelers maybe look for something like that? I think it's an interesting possibility because Kenny Pickett just doesn't have high upside here. And at the end of the day, with the quarterbacks around the NFL, you need a little bit more out of that position, in my opinion. So the Steelers should look. But the more interesting quarterback conversation is clearly with the New England Patriots. They benched Mac Jones now, got Bailey Zappe in there. Malik Cunningham is getting called up. This and that. Are they going to use him as a gadget player? All that stuff. Does New England, I guess, need to blow it up at the end of the year? Let go of maybe Bill Belichick, and they're going to have a top 2, top 3 pick the way things look right now, so they can get one of Caleb Williams or Drake May. Do you think it is time to let Belichick go with that new quarterback and get someone that can kind of bring him up, or should he stay?
Well, I mean, is a good question. One thing I want to pivot to with Pittsburgh, watch out for Kirk Cousins. I think because Kirk Cousins is going to have a very interesting market this year.
Right.
And
right.
he's very Ben Roethlisberger-y. You know, he has moments of greatness. Ben Roethlisberger had a couple ridiculous years with Antonio Brown, Emmanuel Sanders, etc.
Yeah,
they've got young talent there that Kirk Cousins could feast with if he doesn't go back to Minnesota, which I would assume he won't at this point. We'll see what the price tag. New England, I think it's time with Bill. Like, if the Spurs didn't get the number 1 overall pick, we may be having a very different conversation with Greg Popovich. I feel like this is different with Bill because there's nothing like without Tom Brady there. What is the allure of New England? I know he's been there forever, him and Robert Kraft, et cetera, et cetera. There are wonderful places to coach that would yearn for him, with the top 10. I just don't think he wants to rebuild, whether it be they get the number 1 pick or something. I just don't think. Plus, if you want to talk about Caleb Williams maybe going back to college, you think he would want to go play with New England? Yeah. Like, there's no right. I'm going to carry the torch from Tom Brady. That doesn't happen there. That's not what that organization is. They were a losing organization before Tom Brady. That's not what this is. So, like, if I'm Bill, I'm out. I just don't. But the only thing that's weird is he got that extension secretly during the offseason. Yeah. So I don't know if that's like a Kobe 2 for $48.5 million the last 2 years he played with the Lakers, where it's like, thank you for your service. Like, I don't know what.
There's been some reports that it's something that they can get out of relatively easy. Like the 2024 year isn't anything crazy. Honestly, I think you brought up the Spurs and Greg Popovich, and I think it's such a good comparison. And I would use that comparison to caution the New England Patriots. I know that you have the older coach who's led you through a lot, who's won you a lot of championships, who's been one of the best coaches ever, like Greg Popovich. And I know that you're getting a new top pick. They're going to get a new top quarterback, whether it be Caleb Williams or Drake May. No, it's not quite Victor Wembanyama level, but the idea is still the same. Oh, we're going to give one of the best coaches of all time this great young prospect because we got an early draft pick, and he's going to be able. Sometimes you just need something new because right now the San Antonio Spurs are 3-16, and they can barely win a freaking game. All right, so although you're getting the new prize possession and the coach has all of the credentials in the world, I think sometimes with the new guy, it's best to just create something new. Can Bill Belichick build a roster from the ground up again like he did 20 years ago when Brady was young? I don't know. He would probably be a better coach if you inserted him on a better roster that was ready to play right now than what they need to build in New England. So to me, it's the same thing as Greg Popovich, a good reference from you, because I think that the Patriots should be cautioned about what's happening in San Antonio right now and get your new guy, but it's time to move on and start something new. So that's what I would look to do there. But with that being said, we do got to talk about some non-quarterback MVP candidates. I think that right now, a running back and a wide receiver should be at the top of the MVP conversation. Alex is thinking maybe it should be the quarterbacks. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. Before we get into it, though, do want to let you guys know that today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. All right, guys, you're a small business out there, you're hiring, you want to have as many top tier candidates as possible to interview. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. All right. Quality candidates, They're incredibly hard to find. Everyone knows that. And LinkedIn Jobs makes it easy to find them because LinkedIn isn't just another job board. LinkedIn has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. Hiring is easy when you have that many quality candidates because 86% of businesses get qualified candidates in 24 hours. So that's how you know it's that easy. LinkedIn knows small businesses are wearing so many hats and they might not have the time or the resources to hire. Thankfully, with LinkedIn, the process is intuitive, quick, and easy. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Alex, we are going to continue a Thursday edition of the Locked On NFL podcast. We talked about the Thursday night football game, and let's all just be honest with each other. It's time to appreciate football, but also the Steelers-Patriots game is rough. So talked about the quarterback situation for both teams, which is clearly the most interesting thing going forward. But now we got to talk about the rest of the NFL because the MVP race is heating up. And I got to admit, Alex, I'm a bit of an MVP addict. I find a way to talk about MVP quite a bit on our Thursday episodes, but it's just so interesting, especially this season. We're going to talk about non-quarterback MVPs versus quarterback MVPs. Before we do, thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. Remember, it's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. So get subscribed, stay subscribed. Also, you have to check out the brand new 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube from Locked On called Locked On Sports Today. It's the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. You get coverage of all of the top sports stories of the day from local experts and also national shows. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube. Subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Be a part of history. So, Alex, I look at the two best teams in the NFL right now, in my opinion, and at least you could make the argument based on the standings. The Miami Dolphins are number 1 in the AFC. The San Francisco 49ers are number 2 in the NFC, but they just knocked off the Eagles in Philadelphia, and the 49ers look like the best team in the NFC. The other contender would be the Cowboys, and the 49ers dismantled them as well. So other than a little stretch in the middle of the year where the 49ers were a little off tilt, they've completely been dominant every other time. So in my opinion, the best team in the AFC right now, the Dolphins. The best team in the NFC right now, the 49ers. And in my opinion, the MVP of both those teams are non-quarterbacks. It's Christian McCaffrey on the 49ers, and it is Tyreek Hill on the Dolphins. I think that Tyreek Hill is about to put up a massive game against the Tennessee Titans secondary that will propel him to the first 2,000-yard season in NFL history for a receiver. I think if Tyreek Hill goes over 2,000 yards and the Miami Dolphins get the number 1 seed in the AFC, Tyreek Hill should absolutely be the MVP. And if not now, then never. If Tyreek Hill gets 2,000 yards and the way, look, I don't mean to diminish Tua. And I know that historically I have been not a Tua guy necessarily. So it's kind of self-serving for me to diminish Tua in this way. I would get that argument. But at the same time, we know that Tua is distributing the ball to incredible weapons. And we know that Tyreek Hill's value and what he does to open up the offense. We know that Mike McDaniels, it's so comparable with San Francisco because Mike McDaniels is a brilliant offensive mind like Kyle Shanahan. And you recognize how important they are to this whole thing. And it's the same argument for me with San Francisco. Brock Purdy. Look, Brock Purdy and Tua are both smart, accurate quarterbacks that are elite at those things. They're accurate and they're incredibly smart, all right? But they are not the top-tier talents like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert, these elite physical specimens that can change games on their own. Like, they're not that. They are a cog within this awesome system. And to me, the most important cog in both those systems is Christian McCaffrey on one side and Tyreek Hill on the other. And I think the Dolphins are going to finish with a better record, and they're going to get the number 1 seed in the AFC. And if Tyreek Hill goes over 2,000 and doesn't get the MVP, it's a crying shame. And basically, it would, in my opinion, it would mean that it is impossible for a regular non-quarterback player to win MVP anymore. The defense rests, Your Honor.
Yeah, and here's the thing: a couple things to unpack there. Does Tyreek Hill do that on his own? Does Tyreek Hill receive all those?
Nobody does anything on their own in football. It's the most ultimate team sport ever.
Okay. So Ty goes to Christian McCaffrey on those two. Okay, because Christian McCaffrey touches the ball in the backfield and then does it on his own with blockers ahead, etc. Tyreek Hill, the defense for Tyreek Hill is that his yak is insane. Okay, what's his name? What Tua's done though is been accurate like he was in college, and that's why they drafted him over Justin Herbert. Okay, so his skill set is on display. Now, I was in the camp that Brock Purdy wasn't the guy. Okay, and he shouldn't have been given the credit. It was the story. It was it was everything outside of him actually being an elite quarterback. Now,
still true.
Let's be honest. The MVP of the San Francisco 49ers is probably Trent Williams. Okay, but when you look at Brock Purdy, all he's done has been as close to flawless as a quarterback could be. Being a quarterback is hard. Being a quarterback isn't easy. Ask Josh Allen, okay, how hard being a quarterback is. Josh Allen should get all the accolades. If it's numbers-based, give it to Josh Allen. But it's not. Quarterback wins is not the number one stat. And if a quarterback executes a game plan as flawlessly as humanly possible, he should be rewarded for that. Conversely, he'd be out on his ass. So just because the 49ers caught a diamond in the rough, and this is difficult for me to say, talking in the NFC West, where you just have to constantly see them being ahead of the curve. Brock Purdy deserves it after that Philadelphia performance, even though one of them was I think it was a screen that Debo took to the house. It doesn't matter. The quarterback is the most important player on the field. Therefore, the quarterback bears the fruits of everyone's labor in the case of the MVP. Now, the only instance where a quarterback would not win MVP is if a defensive player had a Lawrence Taylor year. And I could see that being a defensive player, like a Micah Parsons era, winning an MVP more than any other offensive player that doesn't play quarterback.
See,
it's just what it is. And the MVP does the MVP matter?
There's no way that a non-quarterback MVP won't be another offensive guy. Like a defender would have to score like 5 or 6 touchdowns, I think, to even be possible.
20 sacks, 5 interceptions, like it could happen. Aaron Donald.
The argument you're making is if the team is good enough, which it has to be for him to be an MVP conversation, you're going to win MVP at 9-8 or 10-7. If the team is good enough, then the quarterback is so important that it should just be the quarterback, and the quarterback will probably get those votes because the team is so good. That's why I think if it doesn't happen this year, if Tyreek Hill goes over 2,000 yards, which has never been done before, it's literally record-breaking. His yards after catch are 606, number one, or 604, number one in the NFL by far. If he does all of that and they go to the number one and they get the number one seed in the AFC, and the MVP is Tua or Brock Purdy with the second seed in the NFC, I just think it's just proof that a non-quarterback will never win ever again. I don't care.
Are you ready for this?
Yes.
Thank you for making I've been saying this across all sports. MVPs, the actual award should be regular season plus postseason. You can win MVP, a regular season MVP. That means diddly jack squat if you're out in the first round because you can't perform in the playoffs. I've been saying it forever. A regular season MVP does a slight to clutch players when games matter the most, where you can win an MVP. Now, Patrick Mahomes, when he won MVPs, it was all the way through. Okay? And yes, a lot of times it'll go to whoever makes the Super Bowl, unless it's, a 7 seed that Pittsburgh Steelers did all the way to the Super Bowl. It should be both, because that would be the true test. That would be the true test about all of this. If the Dolphins offense can't beat good teams like they haven't all year, why should Tyreek Hill win the MVP?
Right. I mean, I just think it's obvious that he's the most important player on their entire team, and he's the elite talent. He's the game breaker. And I would say that Mike McDaniel is number 2 in terms of importance. And I would put Tua at 3. And it's like, I can't ignore that. the value of that, and for that to take him to the number 1 seed, for him to break records that have never been broken before in the passing game, it just has to be acknowledged. The craziness and the impressiveness of that has to be acknowledged appropriately, and it would only be with MVP, not Offensive Player of the Year.
Alex Clancy, Tyler Rowland, Locked on NFL Thursday. We're doing favorite segment of the week next. Games, best games, and there are 2 absolute ringers with a couple others. One that I actually called potentially happening. We're going to find out. There's going to be a culmination for one team in week 14. We'll discuss it next as we roll on here. But first, this episode of Locked On NFL Thursday is brought to you by Skylight Frame. You know, it's difficult sometimes to find presents for people, especially parents. Parents are difficult to shop for, especially as they get older, where they're like, I don't need anything. Just come home for Christmas. But it's like, you need to get them something because you don't want to feel like a butthead. There's a very, very simple yet awesome way to go about doing this. The Skylight digital picture frame. And what it does, I mean, there's so many things that will light up a parent's face with this. Okay, it's a touchscreen photo frame you can send photos to straight from your phone, and they appear in seconds. You can even preload photos before the box is open. So when it's unwrapped, you plug it in, and the pictures just show up. And right now, which is crazy, as a special limited time offer for our listeners, get $15 off your purchase of a Skylight frame when you go to skylightframe.com/lockedon to get $15 off your purchase of a Skylight frame. Go to skylightframe.com/lockedon. That's SKYLIGHTFRAME.com/locked on. Tyler, at Tic Tac Titans on Twitter for all of your Tennessee Titans news every day, free wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube. Clancy's Corner, Locked on Cardinals for me Monday through Friday, free wherever you get your podcast, and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked on NFL your first listen each and every day. Tyler, week 14, appreciate if you didn't listen to me. If you didn't listen to me, week 1. Appreciate football. Now it's gone. It's like your wedding day. Okay, you're already at dessert. You know, I don't even know. Is that right? I mean, I've never been married, so anyways, you know, Tyler, going into week 14, there's some pivotal matchups. I'll let you take one of the big ones here, but I do want to mention one before the marquee matchups. Okay. Rams at Baltimore. I don't know why I've become such a lover of NFC West teams with the Cardinals being there. Probably because the Cardinals are out of contention this year. It doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There is something romantic about Matthew Stafford and this offense winning games. Okay, nobody expected it. Aaron Donald's still there. There were rumblings that Sean McVay and he were going to retire before the season started. Cooper Kupp has taken a huge step back. Puka Nacua has taken over as the wide receiver 1. Kyron Williams is a fantasy darling this year. They seem to have found their running back 1 at least in this system. They go to Baltimore, and this is going to be the true litmus test. And you look at it, it's the early morning slate, and it's very difficult to play in Baltimore. The Rams are 6-6. They're in that log jam of a bunch of teams across the NFL between 5 wins and 7 wins. We're at Saturday at the Masters. It's moving day. It's who's going to win those couple very pivotal games. And then the Ravens are looking at the AFC. There is no team that you 100% trust in the AFC. Is that fair? Everyone has their
right
little
now. Yeah, they've all had their moments. Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
So especially and look at what happened with Jake Browning. You don't know if Cincinnati's dead.
Right.
Like, there's so many unknowns. But as you mentioned before the season started, it's the Ravens' division to lose, and now even more so because the injuries everywhere else at quarterback. So if the Rams go in and get a W in Baltimore in the early morning slate, that would be a massive catapult for the Rams, because then people are going to start talking about the Rams like we were a month ago.
Yeah, that would be huge. And in the NFC, you're right. There is the opportunity to move up. I mean, the Falcons are 6-6, barely holding on to that division. So you get a team like that, maybe in the first round, you could definitely get into the second round. And then who knows right there, if you're a hot team. I mean, the Rams could win a ton of games going down the stretch. So that absolutely is a game to watch. I'm looking at Jacksonville versus Cleveland. Cleveland just finds a way to stay competitive all the time. I don't know how they're 7-5 with the quarterback issues that they've had. Lost Nick Chubb early. That felt like forever ago at this point in time. But really, I'm looking at Jacksonville because Jacksonville was 8-3. Chiefs lose. Looking like, hey, Jacksonville, they just beat a Jake Browning Bengals team. They wake up tomorrow as the number one team in the AFC. And then they do what the Jaguars do. They never take that next step. They never really seize the opportunity that's in front of them. They fight with it. They never just take the sword out of the stone. You know what I mean? And now they're going to go to Cleveland against Cleveland defense that we know is very good. Trevor Lawrence probably not going to be able to play in that game. They lose it. They go to 8-5. You look at a team like Houston playing the Jets. They could get another win. You look at a team like Indianapolis now. They're playing Jake Browning's Bengals. They could win that game if the Bengals come back down to earth after an emotional primetime win. So you could have the Colts and the Texans at 8-5 and Jacksonville at 8-5 with a banged up Trevor Lawrence. I'm just saying Jacksonville's rise last year happened because the 7-3 Titans had tons of injuries and Ryan Tannehill got knocked out and the Titans went on a 7-game losing streak. And the Jaguars, if you remember, barely beat the Josh Dobbs-led Titans at the end of the year. They had a great opportunity to just seize it, and they fought with it. And then in the playoff game, they ended up winning, but they got down. And they just don't seize it clearly when they need to. And you could see Jacksonville maybe losing some games, and with how competitive the AFC wildcard spots are about to be, you could go from Jacksonville looking like, hey, they're about to get the number one seed in the AFC to seeing Jacksonville out of the playoff picture by the end of the year. So I think this game against the Browns is a big game for Jacksonville, and they need to find a way to win that game against a team that has their backup quarterback in as well. They need to win that game.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see a world where Jacksonville doesn't make the playoffs at this point, even though the AFC South is a lot better than people give them credit for.
Trevor Lawrence out for 3 weeks.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think that they've built enough buffer, but I mean, crazy things have happened. Couple for me, and this is kind of a chain reaction here. The Bills and Chiefs, not because it's sexy anymore, because it's not. The Bills aren't a good football team right now. Okay, but if they go into Arrowhead and they
Josh Allen versus Pat Mahomes, so.
Right, it's going to be good, but it's not. But this isn't Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson anymore. There's more compelling matchups. The Bills aren't what they were. Something's broken, and we've said this for 2 years, but something's broken. Okay, now with that, the reason why this is interesting is if the Bills do go to Arrowhead and play a Patrick Mahomes team is averaging 22 points a game, which is the fewest since he's come in as a full-time starter. And then you look at the AFC West, and there's a head-to-head matchup with the Broncos going to play the Chargers. The Broncos playing the Chargers is so pivotal for so many different reasons, ripple effect-wise. So say Denver goes in, gets a dub. That'll put them at 5-1 in their last 6 after losing to Houston last week. That'll put them at 7-5.
7-6.
7-6. And if the Chiefs lose, that puts them to 8-5. So that doesn't mean the AFC West is ready to rock. Like,
look at the Chargers too. They're 5-7. If they lose another game, I think 8 losses disqualifies you in the AFC. I think 10-7 is going to do it with how competitive it is.
I'm talking about more about their head coach. Like, he may not make it up the format if they lose a home game.
Yeah, they lose that home game to the Broncos. They look bad. They go to 8 losses. They could just decide it's time. We're not doing anything.
Yeah. And I mean, again, there's 2 Monday night games this week.
I mean, hold on now. We got to do it. We got to do it.
You do it. I was just mentioning that.
We buried the lead long enough. The Eagles against the Cowboys. We talked last week about Dak Prescott being the MVP. I believe on FanDuel, he has shot up from +600 to +300 since that conversation. All right. If Dak Prescott beats the Eagles and wins the NFC East the way that he is playing as the Dallas Cowboys quarterback, it's gonna be hard to take the MVP away from him. It's going to, just because of the Cowboys thing. So that is still a developing storyline to watch there, because this is the game, and Hurts is banged up, and the Eagles lost last week, and Dak looked great last week, and just the narratives are starting to roll.
Yeah, it's a little bit less for me because they're both going to make the playoffs. So it's going to be fun. I mean, especially for those fan bases.
Right.
It's a good Sunday night football game. Which is awesome. I'm going to do it this time. Alex Clancy, Tyler Rowland, as we say every week, or as Tyler does.
Yes.
Start your weekend early and stay safe out there.
Yes.